Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Z-Cast. And today it is Tuesday, or I should say Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. We are officially counting down our countdown to kickoff as we are halfway through August and looking forward to next weekend for our final weekend without college football is this weekend, guys. We're absolutely fired up. Obviously got some big games coming up next week, but without further ado, let's continue on our podcast series. And today, we will be talking about the Indianapolis Colts. Now, guys, it has been determined yesterday who the Colts starting quarterback in 2025 will be. Shane Steichen announced yesterday that Daniel Jones will be the starting quarterback for this team moving forward. And that means, obviously, it did not mean like a, short-term solution here. This seems like he is going to be the long-term option for the Colts at quarterback in 2025. Now, of course, they still have Anthony Richardson, who is yet only 23 years old. What does that mean for him? Quite frankly, I don't know. It does to me seem like his time in Indianapolis has certainly come up, at least his time with Shane Steichen. You know, this kind of regime, it seems like his time is, they are kind of done with him. Obviously, if they get fired, I could see a new coaching staff coming in next year and being like, hey, we still want to work with this guy because obviously he's got some elite potential. And this guy, you've seen the way he throws. Some of these throws he's made, and especially the one last year against the Texans, you guys know what I'm talking about. This guy is very talented. I think the main issue with Richardson was clearly the problem with him was coming out of the draft, he simply did not play enough college. They didn't play him. He didn't play enough in college. He started like 9 games, I want to say, in college, which is, very unheard of, especially for quarterbacks. And the Colts drafted him 4th overall, which I'm not going to say it was a reach, but for a guy who was thought to be so much of a kind of a project, project prospect there, it seemed kind of early to be taking him, especially the way the Colts sort of threw him out there right away in week 1 just to say, hey, got to learn by playing, which again, started out okay, but he has unfortunately suffered some really bad unlucky injuries to start. Obviously, last season he did tap out, so that's obviously a big part of this, I think. I think there were some questions within the locker room as to whether or not he was really, all in and he was willing to make the changes and do what he needed to do to be the franchise guy. Obviously, a lot goes into that, but clearly they thought that Daniel Jones was the better option. So, again, pretty unsure what that means for Mr. Anthony Richardson. Again, still only 23 years old, so certainly something to keep your eyes on. I do not think his NFL career should be over, but certainly with the Colts, it seems like that might be the case. Now, 2024 was a bit of a disappointing year for the Colts. Of course, they had Anthony Richardson as their starter last year. He ended up starting 7 games, and they actually ended up obviously benching Richardson after he did request to be, subbed off. They did start Joe Flacco for the majority of their games last season. Flacco played okay, certainly not as the same level that he played with Cleveland in 2023, but still, very serviceable quarterback. Had some good plays. So also had a very solid defense, very underrated defense, but obviously, again, that quarterback position, the offense last year really was never able to get any rhythm because they kind of felt like they were always switching out quarterbacks between Flacco and Richardson. And quite frankly, they are basically the most opposite quarterbacks you could be. Got 40-year-old Joe Flacco over here and 22-year-old Richardson, so, obviously very different. So those are obviously 2 very different offenses that they run when those 2 guys were in last year. So obviously very tough for that offense to even build any sort of, to even get in rhythm going last year. But that brings us to 2025. And before yesterday, the biggest debate in the entire NFL in terms of the quarterback competition was in Indianapolis between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. Now, we did watch the Ravens. The Ravens did play the Colts in their Week 1 preseason game. And again, unfortunately, Anthony Richardson suffered a dislocated pinky. So he only played like 1 or 2 drives. And then Daniel Jones played the rest of the first half. And he obviously looked a lot better than Richardson. He looked in rhythm, hit his deep throws. And again, we've never really seen Daniel Jones on a quote-unquote good team besides the Giants. So I'm not too sure. I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but I just think Anthony Richardson should be considered the guy. But I clearly think there's some things behind the scenes. They must not think he's all dedicated. I don't think the locker room fully has his back, because if the locker room had his back, I think there's no doubt Anthony Richardson should be the starter this season. Now, of course, the Colts made some pretty big moves this offseason, mainly headlined on their defense they hired from the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, a very good defensive coordinator who obviously lost his job last year because the Bengals were so terrible. But I think he's a very good coordinator still, and I think he'll fit perfectly with the Indianapolis Colts and Shane Steichen here on defense now. Of course, as mentioned before, they did sign free agent quarterback Daniel Jones. Obviously, Daniel Jones saw an opportunity with the Colts to be their starting quarterback, and good for him. He beat out Anthony Richardson, and here he is going to be their Week 1 starting quarterback. So, obviously, good for Daniel Jones. The Colts also signed a couple guys that are very, very under the radar, but they're going to be very effective for this team, including cornerback Charvarius Ward from the San Francisco 49ers. Now, you pair him next to Kenny Moore, you got a pretty elite cornerback duo, which is obviously very good. You need that in the NFL. They also signed another guy from the Vikings, safety Cameron Bynum, a very underrated player. Obviously a huge addition to their secondary, which is obviously they already have a very stacked defense with guys like DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Zaire Franklin, Nick Cross, the safety, and one of my favorite players is a guy they drafted last year, which was Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. Very strong edge rusher there. Now, the Colts also have one of the most skilled offenses in the entire NFL, if you ask me. Of course, outside of the quarterback, they have one of the more stronger offensive lines led by Big Quentin Nelson at one of the best guards in the entire NFL. They also have a very good wide receiver room led by stud wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. entering year 5. Very quietly put up some very solid seasons. I feel like he's had 5 different quarterbacks every single year. So, again, for the Colts veterans, it's got to be frustrating when you over and over again see, ever since Andrew Luck retired, which we got to take a step back to 2019. That really kind of set the Colts back in this rebuild because, unfortunately, nobody saw Andrew Luck retiring. And the moment he did, the Colts were in a frenzy to find their quarterback. And ever since then, it seems like they've been struggling to find their quarterback. They've gone through Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan. We saw Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson. Again, they've not been able to find their quarterback ever since they also had Carson Wentz, but Andrew Luck retired. So, of course, the Colts also have one of the more elite wide receiver rooms, including Michael Pittman Jr. And now here's a guy who I think is going to be an elite player this season. It's a chance to be one of the top 2 or 3 slot receivers in the entire NFL. That is Mr. Josh Downs, an absolute stud wide receiver. Again, if you get a consistent quarterback play this season, I expect big things out of these Colts receivers. They also have second-year player Adonai Mitchell, who I'm a big fan of, as well as a huge deep threat, Alec Pierce. And now he and Anthony Richardson seem to really click in terms of building that chemistry. Obviously, that throw we're all talking about last year was a deep bomb to Pierce. So Alec Pierce is a very good receiver as well. They also have Jonathan Taylor, a top 5 running back when healthy, coming off a 2021 season where he was potentially in MVP talks. Now, guys, the Colts also had a very good 2025 draft. It was headlined by somehow, all the way at pick 14, I'm surprised how he was still there, but they were able to pick up tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State at pick 14. I don't know how he was available there because honestly, I think the Bears should have probably took him over Colson Love back there at pick 10. But nonetheless, the Colts picked a stud at tight end Tyler Warren, pick 14. I think he'll be a huge impact. And we already saw him in the preseason. He's looked very good. He made some big plays against the Ravens. He had obviously made some big plays with Daniel Jones. So I think he's going to have a great rookie season. Maybe not as good as Brock Bowers, but I would expect a little bit less than Brock Bowers last season out of Tyler Warren. So keep an eye out for him. They also drafted one of my favorite players from Ohio State last season, and the second round edge rusher JT Tiamalu. This guy's an absolute stud. I mean stud. This guy single-handedly defeated Penn State 2 years ago by himself. I believe he had 2 forced fumbles, 3 sacks. Oh my gosh, this guy, unbelievable talent. So the Colts got a steal on defense in the second round. Now, again, I am willing to say this team, this roster on paper, besides the quarterback, quite frankly, is kind of a Super Bowl contender. You got to argue the guys on offense are pretty good, the skill position players. You got Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce. Now you add Tyler Warren and Jonathan Taylor. They also have a very solid O-line. Again, if they could get some consistent quarterback play from Daniel Jones, I was obviously rooting for Anthony Richardson. I still think he's got a bright future in the NFL. Obviously, a young guy, still got some things to work on. Obviously, needs to get better. But, again, I just don't know if the locker room fully had his back again, because if they did, I just don't see them going through with this decision. Plus, there's one more game left for the preseason, so they've clearly made their decision before they saw all the preseason action. They've already said, all right, Daniel Jones is the guy. So, with that being said, now the Colts have a Super Bowl contending roster, but That being said, I do see them finishing 2025 6-11. I'm sorry, Colts fans. Now, I do think a main reason is because their quarterback play. I don't see Daniel Jones being as good as people think he's going to be. I think he'll be okay, serviceable, but I think it's very important for the Colts to have the same quarterback start as long as he's healthy. Start 17 games a season. Build consistency and build a rhythm within this offense. I think is very talented. Has so many playmakers across the field. So certainly a team to keep an eye on, the Indianapolis Colts, for the 2025 season. And guys, just want to say one more thing for today's video. Shout out to the Baltimore Orioles, who have been freaking spoilers lately. They swept the quick 2-game series up in Boston last night. Now, that was a very crazy game last night. The Red Sox had the bases loaded multiple times and did not do anything with that. Now, again, Boston's kind of struggling right now with themselves, but I will absolutely take that. We swept 2 games from the Red Sox, who at the time were still in the wild card race. Obviously, the O's look pretty good, especially the young guys, including Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basallo. And Samuel Basallo had the go-ahead RBI in the top of the 11th last night. Man, this guy's an absolute beast. I love what these guys are doing. They seem to have brought a new energy up here to Baltimore. So obviously the O's are off today, but again, I really love this energy. The O's have won 7 out of their last 8. Don't look now, but the O's are hot. They're going to continue to play spoiler, and we are hosting the Houston Astros this weekend. So, Houston, I'm sorry, but you guys do not want to see us after we just take care of y'all last weekend. So, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and, of course, stay tuned for more. Like, subscribe, and this has been an episode of The Zcast. Thank you, guys.